The sound that destroyed Ethan Calloway's perfect life wasn't a scream. It was his wife trying not to cry. The baby monitor crackled softly in the dark nursery at exactly 2:13 a.m. Rain slammed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse while thunder rolled somewhere above the Hudson River. Ethan stepped through the front door still wearing the same charcoal suit from his Chicago board meeting, exhaustion heavy in his shoulders after a 14-hour day. But the moment he heard Claire's voice through the monitor, every muscle in his body locked. "Please!" I said, "I'm sorry." Her whisper sounded fragile. Shaking. "Wrong." Ethan frowned and slowly turned toward the nursery hallway. The penthouse was too quiet. No piano music playing from the living room speakers. No scent of Claire's vanilla candles. No soft laughter waiting for him after another business trip. Just silence and the low static hum from the monitor sitting on the marble kitchen island. Ethan grabbed it with cold fingers. "Claire?" No answer. His heartbeat quickened as he walked down the dim hallway, Italian marble cold beneath his shoes, recessed lights casting long shadows across family photos hanging on the walls. In every picture Claire smiled like sunlight itself. 7 months pregnant now, glowing in oversized sweaters and white sneakers, always looking at him like he was still the man she fell in love with before the billions, before the private jets, before the empire swallowed every free hour of his life. Another crackle came through the monitor. Then a quiet sob. Ethan pushed open the nursery door and froze. Claire sat curled inside the nursery closet beneath rows of tiny baby clothes still hanging with store tags attached. Her blonde hair was messy. Her mascara streaked. One hand rested protectively over her stomach, while the other clutched a tiny white newborn onesie against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. She looked up too fast when the door opened, panic flashing across her face before relief replaced it. That panic hit Ethan harder than anything else. Claire had never looked afraid of him before. "Hey," he said carefully, dropping to one knee beside her. "What happened?" Claire quickly wiped her face. "Nothing. I'm okay." But her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Ethan noticed the packed suitcase partly hidden behind the rocking chair. Then he saw her phone lying near the crib with the screen shattered. His stomach tightened. "Claire!" He reached for her hand gently, but she flinched before he even touched her. The movement lasted less than a second. Still, it felt like a knife sliding between his ribs. Ethan stared at her silently while rain battered the windows behind them. Claire looked down, ashamed of something she shouldn't have been ashamed of. Then he saw it. A faint red mark around her wrist disappearing beneath the sleeve of her cream cardigan. Ethan's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Who did that?" Claire immediately pulled her sleeve down. "Please," she whispered, tears filling her eyes again. "Just leave it alone." But across the room, the baby monitor camera blinked with a tiny blue light, still recording everything. Ethan stared at the blinking blue light on the nursery camera, while the storm outside rattled the penthouse windows hard enough to shake the glass. Claire slowly stood from the closet floor, one hand supporting her stomach as if the weight of the baby had suddenly doubled overnight. She avoided his eyes. That scared him more than the bruise. Claire had always looked directly at him, even during arguments, even during the lonely months when his company consumed every second of his life. But tonight she looked like someone preparing for goodbye. "Your phone is broken," Ethan said quietly. Claire glanced toward the shattered screen beside the crib. "It slipped." The answer came too fast. Ethan noticed her wedding ring trembling against the fabric of her sweater. He also noticed something else. The nursery shelves were half empty. Several framed ultrasound photos were missing from the walls. The small overnight bag behind the rocking chair was not packed for a hospital visit. It was packed for escape. Ethan felt something cold settle deep in his chest. "Claire," he said carefully, "look at me." She finally did. Her blue eyes were swollen from crying, but underneath the sadness was exhaustion. The kind that built slowly over weeks, maybe months. "I did not want you to come home early," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "Why?" Claire swallowed hard. Because I needed time. Another crack of thunder rolled across Manhattan. The lights flickered once. Then silence filled the nursery again except for the low static from the baby monitor still resting in Ethan's hand. He glanced down at the screen absent-mindedly and noticed a small notification blinking in the corner. Cloud backup available. Recorded 12 hours earlier. Ethan's thumb froze over the playback icon. Claire saw it immediately. Her face went pale. Do not, she whispered suddenly. Please. Ethan slowly looked up at her. What happened here while I was gone? Claire shook her head, tears spilling again. If you watch that video, everything changes. Ethan's jaw tightened. Something already changed. For a second neither of them moved. Rain hammered the glass. Somewhere far below, sirens echoed through the city streets. Then Claire sat slowly in the rocking chair, defeated, one hand protectively covering her stomach. Your mother came here this morning, she said softly. Ethan felt his heartbeat stop for half a second. Victoria Calloway controlled charity boards, political fundraisers, and half the social circles in New York City with a single phone call. Elegant. Ruthless. Obsessed with appearances. But she had always smiled in front of him. Always perfect. Claire looked toward the nursery floor. She said this baby deserves a stronger mother than me. Ethan's fingers tightened around the monitor. Then the screen lit up again by itself. Play recording? Ethan pressed play. The nursery filled with soft static before the footage sharpened into focus. Timestamp, 11:42 a.m. Claire appeared on screen arranging folded baby blankets inside the crib, moving slowly beneath the warm glow of the chandelier overhead. Even through the grainy security footage Ethan could see how tired she looked. Then the nursery door opened. Victoria Calloway entered first wearing a white cashmere coat and pearl earrings that probably cost more than most people's yearly salaries. Behind her walked Savannah Reed, Ethan's adopted younger sister, carrying a leather folder against her chest. Claire immediately stiffened the second they stepped into the room. Ethan felt his stomach twist. He had seen that reaction before in employees' moments before boardroom firings. Fear disguised as politeness. Victoria smiled at Claire in the footage, elegant and calm. You look exhausted, dear, she said while slowly scanning the nursery. Motherhood may not be for everyone. Claire forced a weak smile. I am fine. Savannah quietly placed the leather folder on the changing table. These are temporary guardianship documents, she explained softly. Ethan blinked in disbelief. The room around him suddenly felt colder. In the footage Claire stared at the papers without understanding. What is this? Victoria walked closer. Protection for the Calloway family legacy. Claire took a small step backward. One hand instinctively covered her stomach. Victoria's smile never moved. You are emotional, isolated, and clearly struggling. Ethan travels constantly. We simply believe this child deserves stability. Ethan's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. Claire's voice trembled through the recording. You think I am unfit? Victoria tilted her head slightly. I think billion-dollar families cannot afford weakness. Silence filled the nursery footage for several long seconds. Ethan noticed Claire's hands shaking now as she stared at the papers. Savannah finally spoke again, quieter this time. If you sign now, it stays private. Claire looked completely shattered. Why are you doing this to me? Victoria's answer came instantly. Because women like you mistake love for security. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Every word hit like broken glass. He remembered Claire defending his mother for years. Hosting charity dinners beside her. Smiling through endless criticism about her clothes, her background, her manners. And all this time Victoria had been preparing to take her child away. Then the footage shifted suddenly. Claire tried to hand the papers back, but the folder slipped to the floor. The camera shook slightly as voices rose. Nothing graphic. Nothing loud. Just tension so thick. It poisoned the room itself. Ethan watched Claire recoil afterward, tears filling her eyes while Victoria adjusted her sleeve calmly like nothing had happened. Then came the line Ethan would never forget for the rest of his life. Victoria looked directly at Claire and said, "The only reason you are in this family is because my son pities broken things." The video ended there. Silence swallowed the nursery. Ethan stood completely motionless, staring at the dark monitor screen while rain pounded the windows behind him. Then Claire whispered from the rocking chair, "Now you know why I was leaving." Claire lowered her head after the video ended, like she had finally run out of strength to pretend everything was fine. The nursery felt impossibly small now, despite being larger than most Manhattan apartments. Ethan could still hear his mother's voice echoing inside his head. Weakness. Broken things. Guardianship papers. He stared at the dark monitor screen in disbelief, replaying every moment he had ignored over the past 6 months. The missed phone calls from Claire during late-night meetings. The forced smiles at charity events. The way she stopped asking him to stay home. God. He thought she was adjusting to pregnancy. In reality, she had been surviving his family. Claire slowly stood from the rocking chair and walked toward the nursery window overlooking the rain-soaked skyline. Her reflection looked pale against the glass. "I was going to leave before sunrise," she admitted quietly. "I already booked a car to Connecticut." Ethan finally found his voice. "Without telling me?" Claire laughed softly, but there was no happiness in it. "You barely looked up from your laptop anymore, Ethan. I did not even know how to start that conversation." The words hit harder than the video. Ethan built one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America before age 38. Investors called him ruthless. Financial magazines called him visionary. But standing there in the nursery, he realized none of those things mattered if the woman he loved no longer felt safe in her own home. Claire rested both hands against her stomach and closed her eyes for a moment. "I kept thinking if I stayed quiet long enough, things would calm down," she whispered. "But every week your mother got worse." Ethan noticed fresh tears sliding down her face. "Yesterday she told me this baby would grow up embarrassed of me." Ethan's jaw tightened again. "Claire." She shook her head immediately. "No. Let me finish." Her voice trembled now. "I stopped sleeping because I was scared she would show up again while you were gone. I stopped answering calls from friends because I did not want anyone hearing me cry. I even practiced smiling in the mirror before your charity dinners so nobody would ask questions." Ethan felt sick. Truly sick. He walked slowly toward her, careful this time, like approaching someone standing near the edge of a cliff. "Why did you not tell me?" Claire finally looked at him, exhausted beyond words. "Because every time I almost did, you were boarding another flight." Silence swallowed the room again. Somewhere downstairs the elevator doors opened and closed faintly. The city kept moving while their marriage quietly cracked apart 30 stories above it. Ethan glanced toward the packed suitcase near the nursery door. Then he noticed something else sitting beside it. A folded envelope with his name written across the front in Claire's handwriting. His chest tightened instantly. "What is that?" Claire looked away. "The letter I was going to leave behind after I disappeared." Ethan picked up the envelope with unsteady hands. The cream-colored paper felt heavier than it should have. Claire did not try to stop him this time. She simply sat back down in the rocking chair beside the crib, exhausted, watching rain crawl down the nursery windows in silver streaks. Ethan slowly unfolded the letter. The first line alone nearly shattered him. "If you are reading this, it means I finally gave up trying to protect our marriage alone." Ethan swallowed hard. His eyes moved lower across the page while the nursery remained painfully silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner overhead. Claire's handwriting became shakier halfway through the letter, like she had been crying while writing it. "I used to count the hours until you came home. Now I count how many days your family can go without reminding me I do not belong here." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Every sentence felt like evidence from a trial he did not realize was happening inside his own home. "I know you love me." The letter continued. "But love without presence starts feeling like abandonment." Ethan pressed the paper against his chest for a second, breathing unevenly. He remembered the promises he made to Claire years ago when they first moved into the penthouse together. He promised she would never feel alone again. Promised he would build a life where she felt safe. Instead, he built boardrooms, headlines, and billion-dollar mergers while his pregnant wife cried herself to sleep surrounded by strangers wearing his last name. Claire finally spoke from across the room. "I wrote that 3 nights ago." Ethan looked up slowly. Her eyes were red but strangely calm now, like someone emotionally exhausted beyond fear. "I almost left then," she admitted. "But the baby kicked while I was packing." Ethan glanced instinctively toward her stomach. The tiny life they created together was somehow still the thing holding this marriage together by a thread. Claire lowered her voice. "I kept thinking maybe once the baby arrived, your mother would change." Ethan gave a hollow laugh under his breath. "She will not." Claire stared at him carefully after he said it, almost surprised to hear him admit it out loud. Ethan folded the letter slowly and placed it beside the monitor. Then he noticed something else on the changing table near the discarded guardianship documents from the video. A prescription bottle. Claire saw where he was looking and immediately tensed. Ethan picked it up. Sleep medication. Prescribed 2 weeks earlier. His chest tightened all over again. "You have not been sleeping?" Claire looked away toward the dark city skyline. "I average maybe 2 hours a night." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "Claire." Her voice cracked softly before he could finish. "Every time the elevator opened downstairs, I thought your mother was coming back." That was the moment something inside Ethan finally broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Completely. Because for the first time in his life, Ethan Calloway realized his wife had been living inside a luxury prison built by his silence. The sun had not risen yet when Ethan walked out of the nursery and into the dark living room alone. Manhattan glowed beyond the 40-foot windows in cold shades of silver and blue while rain continued sliding down the glass like tears that refused to stop falling. He loosened his tie slowly, then stood motionless beside the grand piano Claire used to play every Sunday morning before the pregnancy exhaustion took over. The penthouse suddenly felt unfamiliar to him. Too polished. Too expensive. Too empty. Ethan looked around at the marble floors, designer furniture, museum-level artwork hanging across the walls. Billions of dollars in luxury. Yet somehow his wife had been terrified inside it. His phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Savannah Reed. Ethan stared at the screen for several long seconds before answering. "Ethan," Savannah said carefully, her voice unusually nervous. "I assume Claire showed you the recording." Ethan said nothing. That silence alone made Savannah inhale sharply on the other end. "Look," she continued softly, "your mother was emotional. Things became complicated." Ethan finally spoke, his voice dangerously calm. "You brought guardianship papers into my nursery." Silence. Then Savannah lowered her tone. "Victoria believes Claire is unstable." Ethan almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "My pregnant wife has been sleeping 2 hours a night because she is afraid of my family." Another silence followed. Savannah tried again. "You do not understand how much pressure your mother feels about the company image right now." Ethan looked toward the nursery hallway where Claire remained behind the closed door. "No," he replied quietly. "I finally understand exactly what kind of people I let into my home." He ended the call before Savannah could answer. The city outside rumbled faintly with distant traffic and thunder. Ethan poured himself a glass of water, but his hand shook badly enough to spill some across the marble counter. He realized then he had not eaten since noon. Neither had Claire probably. Guilt settled over him like concrete. Then another memory surfaced suddenly. 3 weeks earlier Claire asked him to cancel a business trip to San Francisco because she had a difficult prenatal appointment scheduled. Ethan remembered promising he would try. Instead, he sent flowers and boarded the jet anyway. God. He rubbed both hands across his face, exhausted beyond words. The elevator chimed softly from the private entrance across the penthouse. Ethan immediately looked up. His expression hardened instantly. Nobody should have been arriving at 4 in the morning. Then he heard heels clicking against marble outside the front door. Claire appeared at the nursery entrance behind him, fear flashing across her face before she even spoke. "She has a spare key," Claire whispered. Ethan turned toward the entrance slowly just as the lock mechanism clicked open. Victoria Calloway stepped inside the penthouse carrying an umbrella and wearing a flawless cream-colored coat like she owned the entire building. Then she saw Ethan standing there in complete silence beside the shattered remains of his wife's phone. Victoria stopped walking the second she noticed Ethan's expression. For the first time in years, her confident smile faded slightly. The penthouse was silent except for the distant storm outside and the soft ticking of the antique clock near the fireplace. Ethan did not move toward her. He did not greet her. He simply stood there beside the kitchen island with Claire's broken phone resting inches from his hand. Victoria slowly closed her umbrella. "You came home early," she said carefully, trying to regain control of the room. Ethan's voice remained calm. "Too calm. You should not be here." Claire stayed near the nursery hallway behind him, arms wrapped protectively around herself. Ethan noticed how she instinctively kept distance the moment his mother entered the penthouse. That alone made something dark settle deeper inside his chest. Victoria glanced toward Claire briefly before focusing back on her son. "I came to check on my grandchild." Ethan stared at her without blinking. "You came with legal guardianship documents." Victoria's expression barely changed, but he caught it. That tiny flicker in her eyes. She knew. Claire misunderstood the purpose of those papers, Victoria replied smoothly. Ethan almost smiled from disbelief. "I watched the recording." Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Even the rain outside seemed quieter for a moment. Victoria slowly placed her designer handbag onto the marble counter. "Then you understand this family has responsibilities bigger than emotions." Ethan let out a slow breath through his nose. "You walked into my home and terrorized my pregnant wife." Victoria straightened slightly. "I protected the Calloway legacy." Ethan shook his head once. "No. You protected your ego." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Claire looked up in surprise from the hallway, clearly not expecting him to say it. Victoria's jaw tightened subtly. "You are emotional right now." Ethan stepped forward for the first time. "She has been sleeping 2 hours a night because she is afraid of you." Victoria folded her arms calmly, but her voice sharpened. "Claire is fragile. You refuse to see it because you are blinded by guilt." Ethan laughed once under his breath. "Cold. Empty. No. I was blinded by loyalty." He glanced toward the nursery behind Claire. Tiny baby clothes still hung neatly inside. A half-finished crib sat beneath soft, golden lights. A child was supposed to arrive into love, safety, peace. Instead, his wife had been planning an escape route. Ethan looked back at his mother. "You humiliated her while I was gone. You convinced yourself money gave you ownership over my family." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your father built this empire understanding strength matters more than feelings." Ethan's expression hardened instantly. "And he died alone in a hospital room because nobody could stand being near him." That finally hit her. Victoria's face changed for half a second before recovering again. But Ethan saw it. For years the entire world feared Victoria Calloway. Politicians respected her. Billionaires admired her. Newspapers praised her elegance. Yet standing there at 4:30 in the morning, under cold Manhattan stormlight, she suddenly looked old. Not powerful. Just old. Then Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and quietly opened the Family Foundation board group chat. Ethan typed only one sentence into the board group chat. "Emergency meeting. 7 a.m. mandatory attendance." Then he locked the screen and placed the phone carefully onto the marble counter beside Claire's shattered one. Victoria watched him closely now, finally realizing this conversation was slipping beyond her control. "You are making a mistake," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her with a calm expression that somehow felt colder than anger. "No. My mistake was believing success excused neglect. Claire remained silent near the nursery hallway, but Ethan noticed her breathing had changed. Slower now. Less panicked. Like part of her still could not believe he was finally seeing what had been happening inside this home. Victoria adjusted the sleeve of her cream coat with perfectly controlled movements. Everything I did was for this family. Ethan nodded once. That is the problem. You stopped seeing us as people. The storm outside finally began fading into soft rain, but inside the penthouse the silence grew heavier by the second. Victoria glanced toward Claire again. You have no idea what pressure comes with carrying the Calloway name. Claire lowered her eyes instinctively, but before she could apologize the way she always did, Ethan stepped between them. Do not. Victoria blinked slightly. Ethan's voice remained low. You do not get to speak to her like that anymore. Those words changed something in the room. Claire looked up immediately. Even Victoria seemed briefly stunned by how absolute his tones sounded. Ethan turned toward the massive windows overlooking Manhattan. Dawn was beginning to rise between the skyscrapers, pale gray lights stretching across the city. He remembered being 24 years old, standing in a tiny rented office with 2 folding chairs and a broken coffee machine, promising himself he would build an empire strong enough to protect the people he loved. Somewhere along the way, he built the empire and forgot the people. Ethan slowly faced his mother again. You are losing access to the penthouse today. Victoria's expression hardened instantly. Excuse me? Your keycards. Security clearance. Foundation accounts. All of it. Ethan spoke with terrifying calmness. You will not come near my wife again without permission. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. You would humiliate your own mother for her? Ethan looked toward Claire standing quietly beside the nursery entrance. Her sweater sleeves covered her hands. Her eyes were still swollen from crying. And suddenly the answer felt painfully obvious. No, he said softly. I am finally protecting my family. Victoria's composure cracked for the first time all night. Ethan, listen to yourself. This woman has manipulated you emotionally since the day you met her. Claire flinched slightly at the words, but Ethan did not even look away from his mother. The only manipulation happening in this penthouse came from you. Silence. Cold and complete. Then Ethan picked up Claire's broken phone from the counter and placed it gently into her hands like something precious. Pack whatever you need, he told her quietly. Claire frowned in confusion. What? Ethan looked directly at her. We are leaving for Connecticut before sunrise. 3 months later, the Connecticut house smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh paint instead of marble and silence. Snow covered the trees outside the large farmhouse windows while soft jazz played quietly from the kitchen radio. Ethan stood barefoot in the nursery wearing gray sweatpants and an old sweater with paint stains across the sleeves, carefully tightening the final screw on a white wooden bookshelf beside the crib. The Billionaire magazines would never recognize him now. No security team. No luxury penthouse skyline. No interviews. Just a tired man learning how to build a life that finally felt real. Claire appeared in the doorway holding their newborn daughter against her chest beneath a cream-colored blanket. The baby had Ethan's dark hair and Claire's eyes. Tiny. Calm. Safe. Ethan immediately put the screwdriver down and walked toward them with the kind of carefulness he once reserved only for billion-dollar contracts. Claire smiled softly as he kissed the top of the baby's head. It was the first genuine smile Ethan had seen from her in months. Not forced for cameras. Not practiced for charity dinners. Real. Warm. Alive. She finally fell asleep, Claire whispered. Ethan looked down at his daughter and felt something shift quietly inside him all over again. He had spent years believing protection meant private jets, security systems, and financial power. But none of those things mattered if the people he loved felt alone. Claire leaned against his chest carefully while snow drifted outside the nursery windows. The house feels different now, she admitted softly. Ethan glanced around the room. Handmade shelves. Framed ultrasound photos back on the walls. Soft yellow lighting. A rocking chair beside the fireplace downstairs where Claire read every evening while he cooked dinner badly enough to make them both laugh. It did feel different. Because for the first time in years, the house did not feel designed for appearances. It felt lived in. Ethan brushed his thumb gently across his daughter's tiny hand. "I should have seen it sooner," he said quietly. Claire looked up at him. "You came back before it was too late." Ethan thought about that for a moment. The stormy night. The baby monitor. The suitcase hidden beneath the crib. One more business trip and he might have returned to an empty penthouse instead of a family. His phone buzzed quietly on the dresser nearby with another message from the Callaway Foundation board. Ethan ignored it completely. Claire noticed and smiled faintly. "Big meeting?" Ethan shook his head without even looking at the screen. "Not anymore." Outside, snow continued falling softly across the quiet Connecticut countryside while their daughters slept peacefully between them. Ethan lowered his head and kissed Claire gently on the forehead. No cameras. No boardrooms. No billion-dollar empire demanding his attention. Just silence. Warmth. Family. And somewhere deep inside that quiet little nursery, Ethan finally understood something money could never buy back. Some men lose entire fortunes chasing power. Others almost lose the one person who made their life worth building in the first place.